So in this video, I'm going to let you in on 10 great portrait painting tips. Hi, welcome to Paint Coach. My name is Chris Fornatero, and I'm here to help simplify oil painting so that you can get better faster. Okay, let's jump on in with tip number 1, which is stain your canvas with a neutral wash before painting. You can do this with cerulean blue and burnt umber, sap green and burnt umber, just sap green, just burnt umber. The main thing is that you want to just get a neutral value to start on. Something that's not too dark and something that's not, pure white canvas. This will help you gauge values right from the start. Now you can do this by putting some paint on your canvas, getting some paint thinner, and wiping it down. And you can let this set for a day, so when you start painting on it, it's completely dry. There are also some painters that will do it and they'll just start painting right away. I recommend trying both to see what you like. So many times I see people start out on straight white canvas and all their values end up looking too light because anything on a white canvas is gonna look dark. All right, tip number 2 is if you're going to draw out your portrait first, try not to make it too detailed. There are lots of different ways to start out a portrait. You can completely freehand draw it with thin paint. You can use a proportional divider and get some key measurements. You can use a grid. You can trace it. There's a whole bunch of different ways. My personal favorite way is to freehand draw it as much as possible. I try and do that as much as I can. A lot of times I will use a proportional divider or some form of measurement to just get key measurements where certain things are. I'll start with plumb lines, making sure I get the tilt of the head and the angle of certain features, and then try and get basic measurements of where certain things are. But now I do think there is a time and a place to grid or to trace. If your drawing skills just aren't there, I don't want you to not be practicing portraits and getting all the great benefits practicing portraits can give you just because your drawing isn't up to par. But if you do trace on your image, again, try really hard not to get very detailed. Just block out the main big shapes. Think of it more like a map opposed to a drawing. The thing is, people will do these perfect detailed drawings, got every little eyelid, every eyelash, this and that. And then the painting process becomes more of just coloring inside the lines. And also it's easy to fall into the trap of just coloring in the lines and not paying attention to where things are, because no matter how well you draw in your subject, you're gonna have to make adjustments as you go, and you're gonna constantly be having to step back and assess where things are and slowly adjust. But if your mind is just focused in on just filling in the lines and following this drawing, it's very easy to mess up. So by doing this method of constantly adjusting and looking to move things as you paint, you're going to be making a lot of little adjustments throughout the painting, which is what you want to do. You want to make a whole lot of little adjustments instead of getting to the end of the painting and realizing you need to make a big adjustment. Like, you don't want to get to the end of the painting and say, oh wow, I kind of wasn't paying attention in this certain area and I need to, completely move this whole eye down, which is what happened in this Jack Nicholson painting. So stay tuned to the end of the video to see how I fixed it. Okay, tip number 3 is don't jump to detail too quickly. Start out with a big brush and block out the big shapes with flat color and thin paint. And it's very important here to actually pay more attention to values opposed to color. You're not gonna nail the perfect right color right off the bat. You're gonna build to finding the right color because you're gonna have to get paint and colors on there to make assessments and judge one color to a next. But right now it's important to get the major values to create the general structure of the face, paying attention to the planes of the face, like the 3 major planes of a face, and then working to more specific planes. We want to carve out the main structure of the face here. This is the foundation. We want to have a good, accurate structure that we can lay our features into and look correct. It's very helpful at this stage to squint your eyes, get rid of detail, and paint the big shapes. So you're using a big brush, you're making big decisions, and you're moving rather quickly. In about 20 or 30 minutes, you should have paint covering pretty much the whole portrait. And at this point, you should start to see the person that you're painting. I'm not saying it needs to be a perfect likeness right now, but the basic structure you should look at and be like, oh yeah, I can see it. If you can't see it at this stage, I recommend going back and really analyzing your big shapes and making sure you got those in correctly. Okay, tip number 4 is try the best you can to work dark to light and thin to thick with your paint. Even when I'm blocking out the basic structure and form of the face, I'm using relatively thin paint. You know, it's not like a wash or like watercolor, but it is on the thinner side. I'm using paint thinner, so it's gonna set up pretty quickly and be easy to layer paint on top of it. Just so you know, all these portraits that I paint are pretty much painted a la prima. I'll paint them all in one, 3-hour sitting. I'll come back the next day and make some adjustments here or there. But in general, I'm doing these in a very short period of time. I'm never waiting for something to dry. I get asked that a lot, like, oh, did you do this over multiple sessions? Do you need certain layers to dry? No, you don't. You should be working in a way that you never have to stop and let layers dry. All right, so as far as working dark to light, even when I block out lighter value shapes at the beginning of my painting, I'm still keeping them on the dark side. I'm still kind of making them the darkest light value that I can. That way I can build lighter values on top of it with thicker paint. But you still need to put something down there to compare your darker values to. Okay, tip number 5 is know how to desaturate or mute a color with its complement when it comes to skin tones. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make with their skin tones is they don't desaturate them enough, or knock them back. They're too vibrant of colors. So if it's like an orangey yellowish color, look to knock it back with yellow or orange's complement. Orange's complement is blue, yellow's is purple. So kind of looking to that to knock it back a little bit. I feel that skin tones are always more desaturated than people think. And I think a lot of painters underestimate how desaturated they can go with their colors. Now, if I'm saying things like desaturate color and colors complements and you don't know what I'm talking about, I highly suggest learning more about the color wheel and just basic color mixing, understanding how to use just the primaries in white to mix any color. Trust me, understanding that and knowing how to do that will make identifying and matching skin tones so much easier. Now, I actually go over all of that in my Foundations of Oil Painting course. You can actually get the color mixing video from that course for free. I'll put a link to where you can get that in the description below so you can learn some good foundational color mixing skills. Okay, tip number 6 is look for the 3 main color zones in a face. A lot of times, like the nose and the cheeks are going to be a lot redder because the blood vessels are just, closer to the surface of the skin. So you're going to catch a lot more reds in there. That's not the case in the forehead. So the forehead's, not going to be as red. And on the chin, jawline, and around the mouth areas tend to be cooler and grayer. Look for some blues, greens, maybe even some purples, just a cooler values, because a lot of times there's facial hair. Even if you can't see it, it's there microscopically and it just catches light differently. A lot of times I see people painting faces and it just looks like they kind of mixed up just one color and then just found different values of that color for the entire face. It can take away from kind of the realness of it, because we have all different kind of colors in our face. There's different colors in different areas, and that tip of the 3 different color zones, that can help you see and find a wider range of colors. All right, tip number 7 is don't stay on one area too long. You should be working around your painting. You always say, if you have a color on your brush and you're painting a certain area with a certain color, find every other area that you can find in the portrait that you can use that color. That's going to give your portrait color harmony because you're going to be using, the same mixture in all these different places. It's also going to keep you from building one area up too much. So going back to what I was saying before about drawing and finding the placement of things as you go, that's tied directly into working the painting as a whole. If you're constantly moving around, you're constantly adjusting, you're constantly seeing how things look next to other things, judging spaces, you're just gonna catch a lot more mistakes while they're small mistakes if you're moving around the painting. Also, developing other areas of the portrait can help you figure out other areas. A lot of times I'll be painting, I'll kind of get to an area where I don't really know what to do. Like I don't know where to place something or where to put something. So I'm like, I'm gonna move on to other areas. I'm gonna develop other areas, and hopefully by developing those, it will make more clear what I need to do in the area that I was confused in. All right, tip number 8 is take your time to understand at least basic facial anatomy. Understand how certain features are constructed. Understand the basic planes of the nose, what is going on with the eye, how's the mouth work, the lips tucking into the corners, and just having a base understanding of that stuff can help make portrait painting a lot easier. It will just help you see more it will help you organize the chaos of shapes and colors that you see when you look at a face. A specific example is just, understanding the bottom lip. Just the bottom lip alone, you can break down into 3 basic planes: the inner plane, the middle plane, and the outer plane. And the middle plane tends to be the lightest because it's catching the light, whereas the other 2 tend to be darker. I mean, just understanding that will make painting that bottom lip a lot easier, and you'll be able to see that. You'll look at portraits now and be like, oh yeah, I see that. That's kind of what's going on there. So it's very worth it, I feel like, to do studies. Just do a study of a nose, of a eye, of a mouth. You can get a lot out of it, and just the more you understand the form of the features, the easier it's going to be to paint it. It's that simple. Okay, tip number 9 is always be thinking about your brush work. Be thinking about it when you're doing the big, broad shapes at the beginning. Think about it even at the very end when you're using a very small brush. I always say that my process is identifying a shape and then covering that shape in as few brush strokes as possible. Having an economy of brush strokes is really going to add a certain level of confidence to your painting. Now, if you want a good exercise on practicing using an economy of brush strokes, I just made a video on that. I'll put a link to that above right here. But try and think about your brush strokes like it's paper mache and you're trying to wrap it around your subject. We don't want to waste anything that we have to better portray the form of this face. We don't want just arbitrary brush strokes going in any kind of direction. We want those brush strokes to translate form. And again, going back to the last tip, understanding anatomy will help you understand that form and will help you understand how to wrap that paint around it. If you understand the form, the anatomy of it, it's going to influence your brush work. It's going to make your portrait paintings better. All right, tip number 10 is don't be afraid to make big changes at the end of your painting. Try and get a fresh look at your painting. You might have to leave it for a couple hours and come back, flip it upside down, look at it in the mirror. Here, I took a picture, put it in my phone and mirrored it. I had a suspicion. I was like, oh, is this eye on the right too high? And so on my photo reference, I drew a straight line from the bottom of the left eye and compared the distance from that line to the eye, and I noticed mine was definitely higher. So I was like, all right, I gotta move it. Luckily enough, it was a small enough area. The paint wasn't that thick that I could easily just kind of paint over top of it and move it down. If you need to, you can always scrape off what paint you can with a palette knife, wipe it with a paper towel. That way you're not having to pile on paint and you're fighting against the paint that's on there. But it's no big deal. Like, this is a part of oil painting. It's so much pushing and pulling. And one of the advantages you have with oil paints is that it's very easy to fix things. You can wipe it away, you can move it, you can manipulate the paint that's on there, use it to your advantage. So many times I'll do portraits and at the end I'm realizing, oh, I need to move this, I need to move that. But it's fine, it's really not a big a deal as it sounds. I always say, don't be willing to settle for a good painting. Always be trying to make a great painting. Nobody wants to be just a good artist. You want to be a great artist. So don't settle for good, always go for great. And when something is wrong with your painting, don't try to ignore it. Don't try and justify it and be like, oh, well, no, maybe, no, it, fix it, make it better. It's worth it. Trust me. All right. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. As of posting this video, we are very close to 100,000 subscribers, which is absolutely crazy. I can't thank everybody enough out there who watches these and enjoys them and likes them and comments. I read a lot of your comments. I can't always respond to all of them, but I read a lot of the comments to understand what you need more help with. Like, I'm making these to help you, and the more information I get from you in the comments section about what you're struggling with, the better I can construct more helpful videos. All right, in the description of this video is a link to my Foundations of Oil Painting course. Highly recommend starting there if you're looking for more direct instruction. Also down there's a link to my Patreon page that has over like 60 painting video tutorials. And if you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero here telling you to go get painting.